Okay, so welcome to part 2 of this video. We're continuing on laying the basics. We've said that a plan is either, according to Henry Mintzberg, a plan is either a ploy, a pattern, a position, and so forth and so forth. So in this video, I just want to give an example of what we mean by a strategy has a ripple effect, and we'll be looking at the approaches of strategy in this case. Now, let's see what we basically mean. So I'll place a company over here and I'll call it Boeing. This is an example we did last time. Boeing, and I don't know why my pen is misbehaving. Boeing, and I'll place the competitor on this other end and I'll call them Airbus. So to help us understand what we mean by the approaches of strategy, these two companies will give us a perfect example. Now, Airbus and Boeing are in the airplane manufacturers, and if anything, Boeing and Airbus has the biggest share of the market, Cessna being the smaller end of the spectrum. Now, most of them, their supply chain is structured in this sense. They're here, the manufacturer, and the company is here. We call it the focal farm. The airline is the immediate customer. Then you have the travelers on this end. Therefore, in terms of reach of the supply chain, they are only serving the most immediate person, even though their impact will affect the people down the chain over here. That is what the supply chain looks like. Therefore, what is most important to an airline? An airline is more concerned about the following: profitability, and we can be able to achieve profitability by reducing costs, that's one thing, and increasing the sales, that's another way. Now, increasing the sales in this space would be very, very challenging. So most of the airlines will be looking for ways on how they can be able to cut costs. Here comes in the economy bit. If you can get a more efficient fuel, that's good for you as an airline. If you can get a more efficient plane, that's very good for you as an airline. Now, this is where Airbus comes in, the plane aspect. They come up with a plane model that is very, very efficient. Now, this is, I think, the A320 was very, very efficient and it had serious fuel savings to the airlines. Now, that meant that the ripple effect, again, the ripple effect of Airbus's strategy would be people would start moving from the Boeing 737 and the like to Airbus's product. And it did happen because, again, airlines are more concerned with profitability and cutting costs. And Airbus got serious orders when they introduced that plane. Now, Boeing had to give a response to this. And the only response has two options. The first option is they come up with a new plane model from scratch. That's the first thing. But it would be too expensive because it's over $1 billion in cost. Or they improve on their existing fleets. And they opted for this one. So what they did is they picked the classical 737, Boeing 737. And they decided that let us make the engine bigger so that it can be more efficient. Now, initially, if this is a plane, sorry, I'm not a very artistic soul over here. If this is the plane, the wing of the plane, and this is the engine over here, and this is the factory that we're looking at over here. Traditionally, the engine was harnessed or fixed at the wing at this point. Now, if they made a bigger engine, of which that was the plan, they made a bigger engine, and they kept the place where they are harnessing the engine at the wing at the same spot. This is what it would be basically look like. Now, it seems like a simple thing, but it had implications. And we said in our last class that the reason why this would be a problem is because it would call for a different factory design, because this is the ground clearance on the new engine and this is the ground clearance on the old engine. Now this difference over here would change the factory design and would mean that we spend more money to have a factory for this new plane that we are calling 737 MAX. Now they opted not to go down that road, and again they did a shortcut and they decided, let us bring this engine to this place over here. Now, so that the engine is somewhat overlapping the wing on this case. Now, it worked because it meant that the factory remains the same because of the engine. The engine has been raised a bit to go at a different position in the wing. It saved them cost, yes, but it created an aerodynamic issue that they had not foreseen. In other words, when the plane is taking off, it was shooting up too fast because, again, the plane was very, very powerful. Taking off, shooting up too fast. So they opted to have a system, and they call it an MCAS system, and this is a system that had a sensor at the front, and once the plane or the MCAS system noted that the plane is shooting up too fast, it points the nose downwards. It corrects itself so that the plane goes downwards. Now what they did is they decided not to train the pilots on this MCAS. Now, they did not tell them should the MCAS malfunction or whatever, all those things that are technical jargon but this is not a flying class anyway. They did not train the pilots. That means the persons who were in charge of the plane were noting across the board that the plane was misbehaving, but they did not have as many accidents. If anything, there were only 2 accidents. And these 2 are unacceptable by flying standards. They are unacceptable because flying is the safest mode of transportation. Now, the problem is, once the whole story leaked and it was discovered that the 737 MAX had a problem, the ripple effect again was all the 737 MAX were grounded and taken back to FAA for approval processes. Again, they go through the whole system of approving a new model all over again. But that is not the only problem that happened. The other problem is that even though the manufacturers over here are not answerable to the direct customers on this section, the travelers were unwilling to travel using the 737 MAX because it was basically deemed unsafe. That's the second thing. The third thing is that what was meant to be a response to Airbus, if anything, made Airbus seem to be the best choice for the airlines at that particular moment. Then you had Lego suits on the other end, and so forth and so forth. Now, what I'm basically trying to put across as an idea over here is that whatever strategy that you will decide to have, whether it is a reactionary strategy or what you call a proactive strategy, there will always be a ripple effect to it. And this ripple effect is what will basically create what we call a modification to the original plan that we had. Therefore, in terms of strategy, we can say we have one, what you call a rational approach, and this is also called the deliberate approach of strategy, and this is where I am proactive about my strategy. It is Airbus decided, let us make an efficient plane. That is rational approach. The second one here is what we call a reactive approach over here. And the reactive approach is basically Boeing saying that our competitors have come up with a new product and we do not have the time to come up with a new product. Let us just respond to them by cutting corners and saying that we now have a new model and we shall call this new model 737 MAX. That is basically a reactive approach, and the reactive approach is what you call the emergent approach also. It is also called the emergent approach. Now, the third one is what you call logical, incrementalism. And in logical incrementalism, what we're basically saying is, I had an original strategy, but the minute this whole thing happened over here, we had to change direction and come up with a new strategy. Now that is, we had an original strategy over here, but once we went to the ground over here, the original strategy had to change into something new. This is basically what you call logical incrementalism. So if there's any key takeaway, is that any plan that you have will always change and morph as it is subjected to normal working conditions or normal industry conditions. That's it for this video. Let us go to the other videos.